Hello, and on this particular mental prepisode, we're going to talk about not focusing on your last cigarette. It is super important. It is one of the things that all of us who try to quit smoking face, and it's a big hurdle because you can psychologically build yourself up to be emotionally attached to that last cigarette, and you look at it longingly of, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this thing I enjoy so much again. Don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. And a good way to avoid that is try to set it in your mind that you're going to quit and do it far in advance ahead of your quit date. Months, maybe even an entire year. But set your quit date. That's the day you're going to smoke, or you're going to quit smoking. And up until that point, you'll have plenty of last cigarettes. So not every cigarette is enjoyable. I want you to think about that during that time period between when you're deciding to quit and your quit date, and you're having all these last cigarettes. There's going to be several cigarettes that you come across that you just you're not in the mood to smoke, or the cigarette tastes nasty. There's something weird about it. Sometimes weird parts of the tobacco plant get in there and it's funky. Or you're just physically not feeling well enough to smoke. And I want you to think about those. Think about the ones that make you feel gross and that you can't finish. For me personally, it was about one cigarette per pack at least that I wouldn't be able to finish, and at some points it got to the point where I'd gag, have a gag reflex a lot, and that was towards the end. Started really grossing myself out by it. This will vary person to person. The phenomenon can be used to your advantage by applying it to the dilemma of approaching the quit date. If you start planning to quit far enough in advance, you will have many of these moments to help reinforce your plans. I went over that earlier. Again, I'm reading from a script, so I may bounce back and forth and be repeating things, but I want to make sure I'm crossing all my T's, dotting all my I's, and covering all bases here. Let's see, what else do we have? When you finally approach your quit date, it should feel more expected and as if it had been a long time coming and you've been anticipating it. You've had hundreds of thousands of last cigarettes, and when you do reach the night before you quit, you should smoke at the same frequency your body has been acclimated to, at least for that specific moment in time. Rid yourself of any excess cigarettes before you go to bed. So if you're able to time it to where you actually do smoke the last cigarette in your pack and you happen to just go that route, great. If it doesn't end up being that kind of timing, then you need to take a further step in commitment to actually quitting and destroy the remaining cigarettes. And I mean make them unsmokable. Whether you got to put them in your blender and have fun and just chop them up, or you can soak them. And when you soak a cigarette, it's useless at that point. It's not going to be enjoyable. And maybe you do something awful to it as a punishment, that if you ever do need to smoke or you feel desperate enough, you smoke something that's going to completely gross you out, like a cigarette that has a wet filter or something like that. That's nasty. You don't really have to go to those lengths. I don't really recommend that. I think you should destroy all excess cigarettes. Don't leave them around. You need to not have any butts around your house. We'll go over that in another prepisode. But yeah, get rid of whatever excess cigarettes you have, and don't focus so much on, I've only got tonight to smoke. I gotta smoke a whole bunch. That is just gonna make your quitting experience crazy if you're trying to do cold turkey, because your nicotine levels are going to be so much higher, and so your withdrawal symptoms, your physical and mental withdrawal systems, because nicotine affects the mind quite a bit, chemically alters the mind, your withdrawal symptoms are going to be wild and much more difficult to manage than they would be if you were tapering off your smoking, as opposed to panicking and, I'm not going to smoke anymore, so I got to smoke as much as possible. In an earlier prepisode that I recorded, and it may be in a different order depending on how I decide to post these things and place them, but in another episode I talk about how you should probably not make your quit date right before a social gathering, because people traditionally smoke more when they're engaging in more conversation, maybe they're drinking, and therefore it makes your nicotine levels way out of control. Or at least get the amount of smoking that you are going to do pre-planned before you go to that event. Maybe don't go there with enough cigarettes. Make sure you don't bum any cigarettes and you space them out adequately. And if you get down to your last cigarette, you say, I'm absolutely not going to smoke whatsoever until my final cigarette of the night right before I'm leaving, or maybe when I go home, or what have you. But do your best to manage that. But if you can't, again, don't put your quit date right next to one of those events. And if you want to even go a step further to help prepare yourself for going to that event and not smoking as much, I also covered this in another Prepisode. Try to wean yourself off of pairing a cigarette with somebody else that is smoking. We often pair when somebody lights up a cigarette that we need to do so. That's what makes it so difficult to see it on TV when somebody's smoking. We've paired, when somebody smokes in front of us and they're a smoker, then it's the opportunity to light a cigarette up. You should see chain smokers and how much they trigger each other back and forth. It's wild. So that is it for this particular Prepisode. Do not focus on your last cigarette. It is not as important as you're making it out to be. You've had thousands of last cigarettes. And we'll see you on the next Prepisode. Good luck to y'all.